The symbiote season is here for Marvel Snap. Let's dive on in and talk about how Agent Venom and Scream are impacting some of the best performing deck lists in the game. My first Jeff's picks this week is my favorite Agent Venom brew, which is a rehash on an old Bast Pixie deck I used to really enjoy. Agent Venom and Bast both put Iron Man and Mysterio into absolute overdrive. It's worth noting when you set the power of Mysterio, it sets the power of the clones as well, essentially turning him into a mini Doctor Doom, especially when you get to use him in tandem with Blue Marvel to power up your entire board. Pixie gives this deck really explosive draws where your opponent's not going to be able to predict your output range, since she can make these incredibly powerful 5 energy cards cost just 1, meaning you can play them and copy them with Mystique all in that final moment of the game. As far as higher series cards go, I think Pixie and Agent Venom are pretty important for the strength that this deck brings to the table, but Silver Sable and Nico Benoit are easily substituted out for other good 1 energy cards, such as Hawkeye and Rocket Raccoon, that play well with our power increasers. Agent Venom Silver Surfer kicks off our high potential category this week, i.e. deck lists that have promising metrics and albeit smaller sample sizes on the untapped tracker as people are climbing back to infinite. One thing that's pretty noteworthy about this deck is Surfer has always played a relatively low power core of cards, so Agent Venom slots pretty organically into here, with Cassandra Nova and Sage likely being the notable inclusions that get extra good when Agent Venom is powering them up, but also are pretty fairly generically good cards. I think Surfer in general is relatively well positioned right now, with Killmonger being fantastic against the variety of people that are playing Bounce and other things with 1 energy plays. As far as higher series cards go, Sebastian Shaw is definitely the most important one in Silver Surfer to give you a big stat line consistently, while the other higher series cards here are easily replaceable with other 3 energy cards, such as Wolfsbane or Ironheart, that work well when Agent Venom powers them up. Our next high potential deck list is an all-in Scream variation designed to batch your opponent's cards around the board. Scream essentially creates a 4-point swing every time you move an opposing card, taking 2 points away from the thing that moved and adding 2 points to herself. This means things like Spider-Man and Polaris effectively become 9 points worth of stats for 3 energy, which is an incredibly premium stat line. This deck list also gets to leverage Kingpin as well as Kraven as alternative things to Scream, or in addition to her, to get even more value as you batch your opponent's stuff around the board. One big question mark in my mind as I look at this deck list is it has a lot of really chunky top end, so I'd be curious to see, after playing out games with it, if Cannonball, Arrow, and Magneto all together, on top of things like Stegron, really feel like they're appropriate at the top end of the curve. Up next, we have a Sarah Hitmonkey deck. This archetype actually used to be one of the heaviest hitters in Marvel Snap for some time, but the raw numbers it was able to put into play, as well as how frequently its tech cards lined up appropriately into the opponent, got overshadowed as the game matured more. I think this deck list has a lot of neat things going on. First, Agent Venom as well as Gwenpool and even Phastos can all supercharge your copy of Mysterio to make it so your opponent doesn't know exactly how many points you're going to have and where. Sarah, in tandem with Monkey, Mysterio, and Absorbing Man, also gives you a phenomenal way to put out a ton of stats. With Sarah in play, you can play all 3 of these out on the last turn, letting your Absorbing Man copy your Hitmonkey and get 2 big points in different lanes, while also powering up stuff like Bishop. Similarly, Absorbing Man can be played alongside Sage on that last turn to get 2 of her effect, really letting you go tall in addition to being interactive with things like Shadow King and Killmonger. This deck list does feel like it has a lot of must-have higher series cards. Sage, Gwenpool, Hitmonkey, and honestly even Grandmaster are all probably pretty important in addition to Agent Venom. Phastos is a card that I could never in good conscience recommend anybody pick up, but I think you could try another tech card like Shang-Chi or Rogue in that slot, or even a utility card like Invisible Woman to make your Killmongers a bit better. Our next high potential and Scream deck list in today's roundup is a Clog variation. This deck list has a very minimal number of movers, but they also tend to be pretty good with the Clog strategy. Things like Polaris and even Arrow can be used to efficiently lock up your opponent's side of the board. I think it's also noteworthy to call out that Kate Bishop's Grapple Arrow could be uniquely powerful alongside Scream, i.e. if you grapple Arrow and then play either a Green Goblin or Kate's Acid Arrow, move moving them across the board. It'll actually trigger Scream, giving the card you've given to your opponent even bigger penalty and scaling up your 2-drop even further. The next high potential deck list that caught my eye is a Madam Web Elsa Bloodstone mashup. Madam Web, in theory, is very good with Elsa. You can play a card into their lane every single turn, power it up for 2, and then the following turn move something out to then get Elsa's bonus again. This deck list at its core also has the Kitty Pryde, Thena, Hope Summers, Angela package alongside Elsa Bloodstone, so you have a lot of ways to get value out of these cards. It ties off its top end with interactive bits like Shang-Chi and Cannonball, as well as Alioth to potentially prevent big combo decks like Hela from popping off against you. The must-have higher series cards for this deck are definitely the Elsa, Hope, Thena, Kitty Pryde package, as that whole core really works well together. I think Cassandra Nova, White Widow, and Cannonball are all pretty replaceable with other generically good cards that you can play at similar energy costs. Madam Web probably has some wiggle room, and Jeff the Landshark as well, with cards like Nocturne or Nightcrawler that you could move around the board, and Alioth is probably uniquely positioned to give you a chance against things like Wong and a guessing game with Hela, but if you're in the market for a different 6-drop, Magneto probably does an okay job in a pinch. Wrap up our high potential category this week with an Agent Venom take on an old favorite in Thena Darkhawk. This deck list has always loved playing Iron Man alongside Darkhawk, so that way Mystique has the option to copy either of them, and Agent Venom is obviously phenomenal with Iron Man, but also works well with a variety of other cards this deck is already playing. It essentially just got a strict upgrade with our latest season pass card, and it's putting up very promising metrics early on in untap as people is climbing. Unfortunately, this deck list is just a giant mess of higher series cards, with Nocturne and maybe Cassandra Nova being ones that are replaceable. Whatever you substitute them for, you just want to make sure they work well with Agent Venom and probably fill in earlier on the curve at the 2 or 3 energy slot. Moving into our most popular category, Bounce isn't only putting up lots of play rate, but also having pretty high performance metrics to boot, featuring Agent Venom. I think this makes a lot of sense. This archetype has always played a lot of low power things. Outside of Beast, everything gets an upgrade when Agent Venom hits the board. I also think this archetype in general tends to be phenomenal at climbing back up to infinite, because it can often conceal power back in its hands, which makes it excellent at farming 8 cubes from the AIs. It's also worth noting there's a lot of variations in these decks. There's this variation on your screen right now playing Hitmonkey, but there is a secondary build as well that has a lot of overlap, but is playing Werewolf by Night and Iron Man at the top end instead. The next most popular deck per untap metrics is Hela, because gamers are incredibly boring and enjoy an easy button whenever one is available to them. This deck list continues to be incredibly dry, but at least so far it looks like bounce decks powered by Agent Venom are able to keep up. Finally, as in the case where any metagame with Hela being popular, Clog is the 3rd most popular deck that's also having pretty solid performance metrics so far on Untapped. Not a whole lot to say about this list. Fill your opponent's board up while making them frustrated, and make sure you could win games deterministically, farming lots of 1, 2, and 4 cube wins. While I'm not a huge fan of Clog and Hela being popular, there's no denying that Agent Venom is exactly the type of card that I personally enjoy playing. Whether it's tiny value decks, Darkhawk, or even Bounce, it powers up a lot of things that I enjoy playing. As always, I'd love to hear from you all at the start of the season what you're finding success with climbing back to infinite. And if you enjoyed my roundup today, be sure to snap that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of my roundups here in the future.